today, this webinar on AI for Business. I can see a few familiar names there, so I think most of you will know the flow here. So I'll introduce Pete Sharp, my colleague who heads up the department, which includes financial transformation, pre-sales and enterprise architecture in HSO. So Pete's going to talk through some of the benefits, challenges and opportunities of artificial intelligence. If you just jump onto the next page, Pete. To start it off, we've got myself, Chris Tilley, I'm hosting, and Debbie is organizing these things for us and catching up and making sure you're all on. And you can see on the right, I took the opportunity to start using AI to generate a picture of what AI thought Pete Sharp might look like. So I gave what I thought was a pretty detailed description of Pete, and that's what came back. So just to start the conversation off on whether AI is entirely reliable in all situations, I thought that would be a good place to start. And note that even architect is spelt wrong in that image. So with that, I'll pass over to Pete. Keep the questions coming, put them in the chat, or message me directly and we'll pick up again at the end. But over to you, Pete.
Thanks very much. A remarkable likeness, I think everyone will agree. That sort of leads into where we want to start today, which is talking a little bit about where AI is up to. And this provides a bit of context for how we should think about it and where we should direct our efforts and investments into trying to get the most out of it from a technology point of view, really in the shorter term. So to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about how we think about AI and the development of that in the context of future planning. We're going to look a little bit then in terms of what that means for different sorts of AI and how we could work with them. And finally, we're going to look at how we can actually take this into solutions that work for businesses. But that first piece, I think, is a good place to start, which is really understanding the context of where we are with AI. Generational AI being the piece that's generated the noise and the hype, particularly over the last 18 months now. But actually going back much further than that, we've had AI live within the ERP solution within Dynamics 365 in terms of the machine learning around demand forecasting, or some of the components within the sales pipeline, looking at propensity to buy, or the customer insights modeling solution for years. And actually the wider evolution of AI has gone through a number of peaks and troughs over the last 40 years as new horizons appear and then disappear when they fail to meet the sort of realities of actually implementing those and run into fundamental problems in terms of their capabilities. But I think everyone would agree the wave we're on at the moment feels different. It feels like there's a lot coming through from an AI point of view that is going to start to change how we work and is going to have a much more fundamental impact, particularly around technology systems and business systems that are going to shape a very different future and a very different technology landscape from the one that we're operating in today. What I'm very confident that nobody knows is what that actually looks like. And this is not a new problem. There's a very good book on the evolution of new technology systems called Crossing the Chasm that talks about how as a nascent technology emerges, it goes through a very turbulent period of development where people don't know exactly where it's going to land and what it's going to do. Some things survive this period and go on to have a very major impact on our ways of working and on our lives, and other things don't. Other things fall down into that chasm and don't come back out the other side of it. Chris and I were talking before this about a couple of examples, and there are countless to choose from, but one sort of amusing old one was segways. If you remember when those came out, they were billed as the revolution in personal transportation. They were going to fundamentally change how our cities were designed, how we traveled, the use of cars, and any number of other things about our environment. There was a lot of excitement around them. There was a little bit of sort of initial wave of adoption, and then they failed. And they still exist as a niche product, but they have no major transformational impact on the way we work. Conversely, you could look at smartphones. and say they went through the same period when we started to get towards the end of the sort of Nokia 3310 era. And you started to get the emergence of more complicated phones in BlackBerries, in Nokias with the keyboards either side of them, and some of the early sort of touchscreen phones. There was clearly an awful lot of potential in a phone that could do more than answer calls and send text messages. But actually, it took until the emergence of the iPhone for somebody to actually figure out how to turn that into a product that we bought into and that we wanted, and that was capable of fundamentally changing the way we used a mobile phone. And that first iPhone was the turning point. And from there, it became fundamentally established. There became a single model around working with that was embedded into our daily lives and has directed the investment and the evolution of that technology ever since. So when we talk about AI and generational AI, it's worth thinking about it in that context. We're in the period where there is a lot of investment, a lot of noise, a lot of sort of competing and conflicting ideas and developments coming out there, but there is no established direction. There is not a set of trends that you can point at and say, this is where AI is going over the next 10 years and how it's going to affect all of you. What there is a lot of potential and a lot of starting points, some of which will succeed and some of which will fail. And the relevance of this is in terms of how to think about its impact on you and how to start to try and plan for your businesses over the short, medium, and long term from here, and how to work with that uncertainty. And this is really the field of futures, and how to think about futures, and how to understand that what you can control and where the uncertainty exists are two axes around future change and development. And the more uncertainty there is, so the further out we look, if you say, what does AI look like on business systems in 10 years' time? That's an incredibly uncertain place to be, where there is a huge amount unknown within there, some of which we, as customers of Microsoft and as actors within the industry, will be able to affect. And sort of along this line is the increasing complexity that comes with us. So against these different areas, you can look at, I guess, actually, if I stick on this one, the different horizons and the different ways of thinking about what's going to change. Most of us exist down here in plans and forecasts. We create financial plans and budgets for the next 12 months. We create a 3-year plan for the business in terms of initiatives that we expect to start, work through, and deliver over that time period. And that's certainly where a lot of us talk about technology roadmaps. It's in the short to medium term. It's saying we'll deploy a new data and analytics platform over the next 12 months. We'll do an ERP implementation over the next 12 to 24 months. We'll do incremental releases of new functionality over the next 6 months in line with business priorities and delivering for departmental stakeholders. If we start to talk beyond that, and this is where I think AI really comes in, then actually we can't make a plan. We can't have an accurate forecast, because we're moving away from something where the past is a good guide to the future, and we're moving into a world where there's a high degree of uncertainty and a lot of complexity around what's likely to happen. And as we go into this space, there are ways of thinking about it in terms of building scenarios of what might happen, or outlining pathways of what we want to happen given certain conditions. But it's really about building sort of thinking tools about where this technology could go and what our responses would be to those different ways of it developing. And that's very different from what should we implement in the next 6 months, or is this tool going to be useful to us over the next 2 years? And by splitting those out, we can start to focus on what's a practical investment for today and what's a line of thinking that we should develop for the future of our company over the long term. And why I want to make that point and split them out is because I think a lot of the conversation around AI confuses those two things. and it melds this sort of transformational story about how AI is going to upend everything we do, and ERP will be a distant memory, and our supply chain will talk to each other via AIs that will negotiate contracts and deliver goods direct to our customers, and some sort of blurred world of completely different ways of working with what we actually have today and what we as a technology partner can reasonably and sensibly recommend to our customers and say, this is useful, this is practical, get on board with this now, and you'll see some return on investment and some value. So I'm not saying don't follow those paths to think about the future, but understand that that's a different task to saying, how do I apply AI today? And applying AI today, in some extent, is navigating the hype and figuring out actually what's practical, what's feasible, what's effective, and where am I going to get good value for money as I do that. As you think about all of these things, I thought it was just worth briefly sort of going back to the basics, really, which is, again, it's easy to get sort of drawn in by the hype of all of this change. But all of these transformations from a technology point of view, and particularly when it comes to business systems, are really driven by three fundamental points. What do you need, i.e. what's going to be scarce and what's going to be difficult to get hold of that you have value in finding another way of filling it? What do you have a lot of? So what can you use to drive these changes in terms of availability of resources that actually gives you a platform to build from? And I think with AI, critically, who's going to get to do what? When we used the mobile phone example, that sort of turbulent period was where people were busy figuring out who owned what in terms of the operating system, the hardware, the connectivity to third parties. Apple got it right. They figured out the people that own the operating system were going to be in the driving seat for everything else. And Google got on board with that, and Apple and Google ended up winning it. When we look at AI systems today, you can look at AI, OpenAI, and Microsoft's engagement with it, and Google trying to build a competing platform. And you could think, okay, it's the guys that run the large language models that are going to be owning and directing the future of this. And at the moment, that's very much the way it looks like it's going to be headed. Whether that will remain as we see future iterations of this, I think is still quite an open question. So where do we start? I think if we've made that distinction between what's long-term thinking for the future of our companies and the use of AI and technology, and what are we doing today, then we just need to go back to some extent to our traditional ways of looking at technology investments and put the AI side of it to one side and say, how do we judge any new application or new tool or new feature or development that's coming into our purview as something that we could adopt? And like always, you look at the value versus the cost of doing it, and you understand how easily I can deliver something versus how much of an impact it's going to have. And when that comes to AI, I think there are three tranches of AI solutions that we can put things into. The first are the completely pre-packaged tools, the things that are just there and can be turned on and used. Most of us will have used ChatGPT to generate some text, whether it's creating the opening paragraph of a job description or summarizing some meeting notes or creating an opening slide or dodgy images of people for opening slides. It's a very low bar to use it. You don't have to have any significant investment to get some value returned out of these tools. And this is the place that Copilot sits. There's a huge amount in terms of personal productivity, some of which sort of spreads out into roles and business processes that we can adopt simply by turning on the tools that are there today. We don't have to sort of implement them in a more traditional sense in terms of sort of building complex integrations or building user interfaces or anything around it. They're just there. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of value in just picking those up and using them around individual roles. Then we've got what we can compose with the building blocks that Microsoft and other technology platforms give us. So when we're not trying to develop our own models, where we're simply trying to plug together components that are available there, how do we do that? And actually, this is where you can unlock an awful lot of power around problems that are bespoke to you, things that really fit to your way of working, act on the data and the sort of processes that you have that you're trying to automate or to enhance, and will get you quite a significant change in how you operate without having to go deep into the investment routes around sort of the core development of AI. And then that's the final one. If you're at a scale where either you're a very large organization and you can afford to make very big bets on the development of your custom AI solutions, or you are trying to solve a problem that really can't be solved through traditional means, that's where you're into the world of research and development and building your own models. That's not, I would suggest, the world where most of us are going to find ourselves. If you're trying to build driverless cars, if you're doing biomedical research, if you're somebody the size of Maersk and the work they're doing on modeling their supply chain to look for anything that might be coming under sanctioned regimes across hundreds of thousands of suppliers and individual transactions, that's where there's value in those projects. But for most of us, actually, it's the pre-packaged solutions that we can adopt immediately, and it's the solutions that we can build by assembling building blocks of other people's technologies that's where I think we should be concentrating our effort. And so in that form, a good place to start is Microsoft Copilot. This is obviously an AI that's being seeded into the core business applications. So it's already popping up with specific use cases around finance and operations in the ERP, around customer service and sales and project operations and field service within the CRM applications. And it's very rapidly expanding its footprint across business applications. And you can go and take it today. You can switch on cash insights or financial insights. You can enable the new demand forecasting solution. You can start talking to people through customer services with AI generated chatbots in there. You can create projects in project operations or do complex scheduling and field services with the support of AI today. And for the vast majority of these, there is not a large, complicated implementation of new technology to do this. There's a bit of work to do to pick up a feature and enable it. And of course, this also goes more widely. So it goes into the world of all of the Microsoft Office products, and it goes across the Microsoft stack. And fundamentally, this is because this is where Microsoft are betting. They're betting on giving themselves an edge in the Microsoft cloud and in your industry clouds that you all use today by developing it around innovation within their apps, by creating a secure environment for this to work, and by making it work with your data and creating an environment where it can be bespoke to an organization without the overhead of building your own models. So if you enable Copilot, it will work with your data, but it's not taking that and delivering it to Microsoft. It's building insights from it and using those within the context of your apps and your environment. And it's doing this all the way across the solution. So actually, it's not just about the business users that are getting value out of Copilot in generating a financial forecast, but it's your IT department doing that to build new solutions on the Power Platform and have AI help them build that. It's helping developers write code. It's helping everybody secure the environments in which businesses can work. And it's being used throughout these as a productivity tool to develop the solution and the business processes and the individual interactions on top of that. So if you're not, I guess the message being, if you're not already looking at how Copilot and some of the AI solutions can help, it's there, it's available. There are some very good features and functions, and it's very worth understanding what those can bring to your environment. Next up, we have what you can start to put together from the building blocks available within the wider Microsoft stack today. And there are quite a number of those that can be put together at sort of different levels of complexity in terms of what's available for a business user or a super user to do in Power Apps and Power Automate versus what can you start to build if you've got more technical ability and are able to access some of these Azure services and start to orchestrate solutions across a number of these different building blocks. And here you've got different types of AI. You've got things that understand in terms of vision and speech and looking at documents and summarizing what's in them. And then you've got the sort of action side of that. So what can we do with that? How can we compose the results of a search into sentences, or how can we create forecasts, or how can we analyze content that's moving through a business process? And then finally, how do we deliver that to our business users? So an example of how this might...
Hello. Great.
Oh, could you go on mute, please, everybody? That would be lovely. Thank you. Sorry for that, Peter.
Quite right. So this is an example of how something like that could be built up. And this is an example of something that HSO has built with one of the case studies that I'm going to mention in a moment. So the base layer, you've got to sort out your data. And if there's one theme that will come out over and over again when we talk about AI in any of the contexts, it's getting a grip of the data that you've got. You'll have heard, I'm sure, plenty of, again, slightly hyperbolic descriptions of data being the new gold and various other ways of describing it. Fundamentally, this is what powers these models. If you've got access to organized data within your environment, within your business, that you can use to start to run AI models on, you'll get a lot more value out of it than something that's working on a very small subset of that, or is difficult to take in. So in this example, at the bottom layer, we've got a lot of data sat on SharePoint. So we've got many documents, we've got tables of data, we've got related pieces of information, and cognitive search within Azure is a way of chunking that up to make it digestible for an AI model. Then we've got the AI layer itself. So in this, we're using the Azure OpenAI endpoint, which is the ChatGPT side, to do the generational AI. And that's using some tools that you can create within the AI models that tells it how to access documents and how to create references and how to follow a link. And then this content that we're generating in the AI layer has to be exposed to people within our business. It has to be made useful. And so for this, there's a user interface built in Power Apps that lets people see the results of the AI work, to see the content that's been generated and see the sources and the source material from which it's been created. And for all of these, it started at the same point. I think while we've gone through a lot of sort of different versions of what AI is and what it means, we don't have to overcomplicate how we deal with this. As always, there are two sides to the starting point. One is finding the people with the problems in their head and inspiring them as to what's possible with AI, because the practicalities of what you can do is often sort of more expansive than people realize at a practical level. And two is really understanding what problems we're trying to solve. If you've got issues in a business process or in a part of the organization today, it's worth considering that problem properly to understand which tools you can bring to bear on it, in the same way that you would do with any other technology-based solution to a business problem. Once we understand that problem, we can follow the same processes in terms of a design that looks at security, looks at data protection and how people will use the product, and then begin to build that from the available tools and set up the orchestrations and the workflows that use them to create a solution that we can live with and that we can run day to day. So while AI in some respects feels very different, and what it does is different to what traditional sort of ERP or CRM based functions can do, actually we should approach this in quite a similar way of really understanding what problem we're trying to solve and how to tackle this in a sensible way. And that's where I'll leave it and hand back to Chris and take any questions. I hope it's given you some idea of how to think about AI in terms of where we're at as a point in time of the development of AI-based solutions, and a few examples of what's practical and effective to do with what you have available to you today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete. I hope that was useful for everybody. If you just pop back to the previous slide there, Pete, we've next month will be a talk about what's been announced for the release in Dynamics 365 for the Q1, and that will be specifically around finance and supply chain. And we may even look at some elements that were released at the end of last year as well. So not just stuff that's coming, some tangible elements from previous releases. Other than that, thanks everyone for coming, and we will see you next time.